Hey, good morning and welcome back, World History. I'm excited to get started today. I'm always excited to do notes, and I know you guys are excited too. So, let's not waste time and let's jump right into what we're going to talk about today. All right, now, if you remember, what we talked about in our last set of notes was the ancient civilizations. We talked about Mesopotamia, and we talked about Egypt, and we talked about Israel, and we talked about India. And there's one more we're going to talk about today, China. And then we're going to move on to something else. So, and what I wanted you to think about was, hey, what makes all of those civilizations similar? Now, there's a lot of things that make them different, but what makes them similar? Think on those things. Well, today we're going to shift our focus to the Greeks. But before we get to the Greeks, I do want to do a couple slides about China. China was supposed to be with your last set of notes, but I ran out of time because I told you I don't want to keep you over 25 minutes. So, we're going to do China first, but our essential question for today, and remember, when you are writing your notes in your notebook, put the essential question because it tells me where you are, and it tells me in the notes, hey, this person did 1.2, okay? So here's what we're going to try to find out today. What were the characteristics of ancient Greece? In other words, what were the ancient Greeks like? The ancient Greeks, you'll see in a second, are going to give us some ideas that we still use a lot today. And the other civilizations did too. Okay? So, pause if you need to, and let's jump first into China, and then we'll get into the Greeks, okay? All right, China. Now, this is all a continuation of your previous notes, all right? So just keep on going down E, all right? The last thing you had was like F, India, right? Now you've got E, China. So just keep on moving down in your notes. All right, so let's talk about the characteristics of ancient China. Well, hey, big shock, they were built on a river. All right, lots of rivers actually run through China. Some of the biggest are the Yellow River and the Yangtze River. So remember, why civilizations are built on rivers? Well, humans need water to drink, and humans need water to grow crops. And that's one of the things that makes civilizations big and powerful, is that they are growing crops. Humans, before they grew crops, were called hunters and gatherers, and they moved around a lot. And because they moved around a lot following animal herds, they basically never sat down and settled into one area for very long, and therefore they never really had time to develop writing and things like that. So that's a very big deal, guys. Rivers mean food, rivers mean growing crops, and rivers mean water for, the people. Now, China was ruled by dynasties, all right? Now, all a dynasty is basically a family. All right, so let's say you were king, your children, they would either be king or queen, and their children would be king or queen, and their children will be king or queen, and that is a dynasty. You all come from the same family, all right, of rulers. Now, your son, if he's a king, might marry someone from a different family, but bottom line is the male heir usually carries down into be the next king. All right, so that is a dynasty. All right, when you have a dynasty, it's kind of like a lot of people talk about sports dynasties, where they talk about the Lakers have a dynasty. I don't know, guys, I'm drawing a blank right now. The Dodgers kind of have a dynasty. So everybody's got these dynasties, but that just means powerful people that have been in power for a long time. But a dynasty in civilizations means like a family of rulers. All right, now. China also believed in what they called the mandate of heaven. But if I tell you what the mandate of heaven is, I guarantee you've heard this before in the other civilizations. It means you believe your rulers were chosen by the gods and their ancestors. So it's kind of the belief of divine right. It's very similar. Basically, I told you divine right, either you believe your king is a god or your king is like equal to a god. Well, the same thing with the Chinese emperors. They were chosen by the gods or their ancestors, and basically they were looked upon as, if not gods, almost gods, all right? So the mandate of heaven basically is you can't question the emperor because they are the chosen of God, right? All right, now I'm not talking about the Christian God. Remember, guys, the Christian and Jewish God. We haven't even talked about Christianity. That's in another chapter. Because remember, guys, people around the world believe in different gods. All right. So anyway. All right, now guess what, guys? The Chinese had writing, okay? Just like the Mesopotamians had writing, just like Egyptians had writing, and the Israelites had the language of Hebrew. So all of these ancient civilizations had writing, and they left us behind sources that we eventually, over the years, learned how to read from other sources, and that lets us know what the ancient civilizations were like. Here you guys see in the picture the Great Wall of China. All right. Now, different time periods, guys, just like every other civilization we've talked about, the Chinese civilization, guys, engaged in some forms of slavery. Usually conquered people, would be enslaved from time to time. So that's another thing that unites all ancient civilizations, is that they all engaged in some form of slavery. And like I told you guys, slavery back then meant that, that you pretty much enslaved people that you conquered, all right? Another thing about China is that they were patriarchal, and some people might say in even today's society, they're still very patriarchal. And remember, guys, patriarchal means male-dominated, right? But way back in ancient times, definitely most civilizations that we know about were patriarchal, all right? All right, now, one big thing that the Chinese did, guys, was they are where people eventually get gunpowder, all right? So the Chinese, around 1000 CE, so that would be about 1,000 years after the birth of who we would call Jesus of Nazareth, all right? We'll talk about in the next unit where we talk about the Romans, why we base our calendar off of Jesus of Nazareth. But anyway, about 1,000 years, guys, so that would be, right now it's 2020, so 1,200 years ago, the Chinese kind of invented gunpowder. And, Chinese had fireworks and they had all kinds of things. And Europeans are going to later adopt gunpowder and become very powerful. But the Chinese were the first to do it. All right, pause if you need to. Let's talk about Chinese religion. Okay, so real quickly, guys, I like to talk about every different civilization's beliefs and religions because I'll be honest with you, you can tell a lot about people by their religious beliefs, right? And every ancient civilization has a religious belief of some kind, okay? They have a lot of different religions. All right, one of them is called Taoism, and basically they believe this universal order, all right, this universal order of nature, this universal living, the way the universe is organized is called Tao. All right. And within Tao, guys, you've got yin and yang. All right. Within the universal order, basically, you've got the light and the dark, and they balance each other out. And every human has light and darkness in them, guys. I'm sure you've heard all of this. And if you've ever watched Star Wars draws heavily from a lot of different religions. But, the force is very much yin and yang, like a dark side of the force and a light side of the force, and they have balance. But anyway, a lot of Asian cultures believe in this balance of dark and light forces that are in humans and are in the world, in the universe. One of the things that is deeply rooted in a lot of Asian beliefs, including Buddhism, because Buddhism is eventually going to spread into China and things like that, is just the idea that humans should focus on respecting all forms of life. Now, if you're Hindu, that makes a lot of sense because guess what? When you die, you get reincarnated, and you might get reincarnated as an animal, or you might get reincarnated as something else. All right? Sometimes you might even get reincarnated as a god in another dimension, and it gets kind of complicated from there, guys. We're not going to jump into it, but bottom line is, you should respect all forms of life. All forms of life have value. So that is something, if you guys watch, movies and TV, obviously their movies and TV are exaggerated, but when you see like Buddhist monks and usually a lot of Asian monks, they're very respectful of life. All right. Now, another big way of, I wouldn't call it a religion, but it's just a belief system that is still heavily prominent in China and a lot of Asian cultures today is Confucianism. Now, like I said, Confucianism is not really a religion. It's more like a way of living. All right, it was started by this guy named Confucius, who lived about 570 years before the Common Era, or before who we would call Jesus of Nazareth was born. Like I said, we'll get into the Romans. I'll tell you why we based our calendar off that. Confucianism was more focused on like good ways of living, like rules for living, and less focused on an afterlife. And that's what I'm saying. It's not really a religion. It's more focused on what makes a good orderly society. And Confucius believed a few things made a good orderly society. And number one, Confucius believed that all humans were good. Now, you're going to see later on when we get to the end of this chapter that that's a big difference between how European Christians in the medieval period, and then even all the way up until, guys, the 16 and 1700s, are going to view humans as kind of bad, all right? So Confucius believed that all humans were good and capable of doing good things. And another thing, like I said, Confucius kind of taught, like, don't really focus on the afterlife, all right? Focus on living a good life in this life that we have, and basically do a good person, do good deeds, honor your ancestors, honor people in authority, honor your family, and all of these things creates order in a society. And like I said, you can still see in Chinese culture today a lot of Confucius values that are still kind of in place today. You know, a big importance of the family and things like that. Okay, so anyway, that's just a brief overview of ancient China. But once again, you can see, guys, how all the ancient civilizations are very similar. They all have religions. They all have, writings. The ones that we've talked about. Not every ancient civilization has writings, but those do. They all believe, not all of them, but some of them believe their kings are gods, except the ancient Jews. All right, they believe that their king is, a god. So all of these things, guys, are what makes civilizations similar. Okay? Pause if you need to. All right, now, we're going to start into our essential question, guys. And our essential question was, what were the characteristics of ancient Greece? What was ancient Greece like? Okay, now the Greeks, guys, why do we study all of these ancient civilizations? Because they all give us something in modern society. Okay, they all give us some kind of way that we do things today. All right, and the Greeks, guys, are they have a very big influence on why we, especially in this country, do things the way that we do. All right, so really quickly, guys, the Greeks had these things called a polis. Now, a polis, guys, is a city-state. So you might say, okay, Lohan, what the heck is a city-state, dude? Is it a city? Is it a state? Is it a country? Is it a nation? Well, guys, nations as we know it I don't know why it all came in like that, guys, I'm sorry. But nations as we know it didn't really exist at the time. So every city kind of had their own nation. So like Athens was a nation state. Sparta was a different nation state. Now, were they all Greek? Yeah. Did they all speak similar languages? Yeah. Did they all have similar cultures? Yeah, they're all kind of Greek, but every city-state was like their own separate country. Imagine, guys, if Palmdale and Lancaster and Quartz Hill and, Little Rock and all these cities had their own armies and their own, governments. Would we all be very similar? Well, yeah, we all live in the same area. We speak the same languages, but we would all have separate armies and separate governments and things like that. That's kind of what a city-state is. I guess that's the best I can describe it. But anyway, it's a Greek city-state. And it's also a place where people do whatever there is to do in life. So if you want to go do business, you go to the polis, all right? If you want to govern, if you want to get involved in the government or you want to participate, because Greeks are big on voting, guess what? You go to the polis. If you want to go to a temple to worship gods, guess what? You go to the polis. And by the way, the Greeks are, we'll talk about it in a second, they're polytheistic, all right? And if you want to find entertainment, guys, Greeks had these huge amphitheaters where you could go and watch a play or a show, and they had special effects, they had special lighting, and they had all kinds of, interesting things that we have in theater today. As a matter of fact, if you've ever seen a show at a theater, I'm not talking like a movie theater, but I'm talking like a live show, like a Broadway show, a lot of Broadway gets a lot of acting stuff from the ancient Greeks. So a polis also has its own army. All right, so like I said, every polis, every little city-state has their own army. And two of the most powerful city-states were Athens and Sparta in ancient Greece. And if you guys have ever seen the movie 300, all right, that is the movie about how the 300 Spartans, fought off, held off an army of Persians and, a massive army of Persians. Guys, this is a great movie. And it shows you, it kind of exaggerates a lot of things about the Spartans. But guys, the Spartans were a ruthless fighting force, and children from a very young age were literally trained to fight and kill since they were children. All right, so as a matter of fact, when you got to a certain age, I think maybe 8 or 10, you went into military school and learned to start fighting, and then there was a point where they released you into the wild and you had to survive for a month, and if you came back, you kind of you made it. You know, you're like a Spartan. So anyway, guys. Athens and Sparta were two powerful states, like I said, and they often, went to war with each other, and then they kind of, ganged up together to fight, other invading groups. And like I said, guys, the Greeks were polytheistic, which means they believed in lots of gods. So they believed in Zeus, that was their main god, but they also believed in like Athena, and they believed in, Ares, and just there's a whole Greek. It's called the Pantheon, which is all the Greek gods. I'm sure you've seen movies about the Greek gods or have read or heard about them. And later on, the Romans are going to invade Greece and just pretty much take their gods and change their names. All right, pause if you need to. Oh, there's a Greek amphitheater right there. All right, like I said, if you'll notice, guys, the amphitheater of ancient Greece, there's a lot of modern theaters where we kind of make our amphitheater shaped just like, guys, the ancient Greeks. All right, and here, guys, here's Athens. I should have been clicking through this. Here's Sparta down here. All right, this is Italy over here, the bottom of the boot of Italy. So if you want to know where ancient Greece was, it was right southeast of Italy. All right, there's the Greek gods, Autumn, Poseidon, all the Greek gods. Okay, all right, pause if you need to. Okay, all right, so Greek government. Now, oh my goodness, guys, I am so sorry. That's like how you intimidate a student is you throw all the things up there at once. But don't worry, guys, you can pause it or whatever. All right, so let's talk about what we get from the Greeks. All right, one of the biggest things we get, and we get a lot of things, our language comes from the Greeks, is direct democracy. All right, so one of the things that Greeks did was democracy. Now, when you think of democracy, you guys might think of a lot of different things in this country. But basically, democracy in its essence means rule by many, rule by a lot of people. All right? So democracy was created by this guy named Cleisthenes in 508 BCE, which is 508 years before the birth of Jesus of Nazareth. All right, now, what did the Greeks do before democracy? Well, they were ruled by these guys called tyrants. And basically a tyrant is somebody that takes control of a city by force. Now we're talking about the city of Athens. Athens was the big democracy. But so Athens was ruled by these tyrant kings. They took over by force. And sometimes the tyrant kings were good, and sometimes they were bad. But eventually they got sick. The Athenian people got sick of all these tyrants because there's a lot of bad ones. And this guy named Cleisthenes created a democracy. All right, so democracy means rule by many. So that means, guys, rule by the masses, not rule by the kings, not rule by a small number of wealthy people, rule by the people. All right, so they had assemblies, and the assemblies made laws, just like our Congress in this country makes our laws, right? It's one of the places that we get our idea of a Congress. They had this group called the Council of 500 that governed and directed the military. They had courts that judged cases. Now, like I said, guys, look at all the things that are similar between the United States and the ancient Greeks. Well, it's a big influence on why we do things the way we do in this country. All right, so huge influence, guys. Now, a lot of people like to say the ancient Athenians were very equal and wow, what a democracy. They were so equal, guys. And what I would make you do if we had time in class, which we don't today, but what I would make you do is I would say, all right, let's find out if they really were equal. And I would give you primary sources. And what you would see, guys, is you would see that ancient Athens had slaves. So you think they're equal? No. Could slaves vote? No. Ancient Athens had women, obviously. And could women vote? No. All right. So everybody likes to talk about how ancient Athens was very equal, but at the very same time, guys, let's be real, only male citizens could vote. All right, just like the first early years of the United States. Like only white males that owned property could vote all the way, up until the 1800s, and then all males could vote in about 1820, or all white males could vote. And it wasn't until after 1860 that all males, regardless of race, could vote. So, it was definitely a patriarchal society. Women and children were citizens, but obviously children couldn't vote, but they wouldn't even let women vote, even educated women. Now, they also had this group called Metics, which were foreigners, all right? So foreigners, people that lived in ancient Greece, but were not born in ancient Greece. They moved from another area to Athens, all right? And slaves could not vote. So guys, like I said, they had slavery and only male citizens could vote. So was it equal? Of course not. All right, but like I said, a lot of people like to say, oh, they were equal. Okay. Now, here's something interesting. All male citizens were required to participate in their government and fight for their polis. So one of the things, every Athenian citizen basically had all these rights, but you also had responsibilities. Now, I would ask you, students, do we have rights in this country? Of course we do, all right? We'll talk about our rights in another chapter, but we have rights. We have the right to vote. We have the right to protest. We have the right to, to an education. We have all these rights. Now, do we also have responsibilities that go with those rights? And the answer is absolutely we have responsibilities, okay? So, all ancient Athenians were required to vote. All right, so every time there was an election or a vote, you would go do it. And if you didn't do it, guys, the Greeks had a word for people that didn't vote, and it was called idiote, which we get the word idiot. All right, so an idiote, guys, in ancient Athens was someone who didn't exercise their right to vote. All right, so that's where we get the word idiot. True story. All right, pause if you need to. All right, now one more thing, guys, is the Greek Empire. So Alexander the Great was one of the great military leaders of ancient Greece. And what Alexander the Great is going to do is look at this map, guys. This is all the places that Alexander the Great conquered. Now, ancient Greece, guys, look, is right here where my cursor is. So he went to Macedonia, he went into what we would call the Middle East, he went into Egypt, guys, he went into Persia, which is close to Asia, guys, pretty much the Middle East. He pushed into Asia, he had a massive empire. So he conquered Persia, he conquered Palestine where the ancient Jews lived, he conquered Egypt in about 334 BCE. And here's what he did. He spread Greek ideas all over the place. So all over the place, guys, they're going to get the ideas of ancient Greece. Now, we're going to talk about some of those big ideas tomorrow, too, in class. Wait, no, not tomorrow. It'll be Wednesday in class. We're going to talk about some of those ideas, all right? Like the ancient Greek philosophers on Wednesday. But anyway, he spread Greek ideas all over the Middle East and parts of northern Africa. And basically, the Greek Empire is going to last until about 133 years before the birth of Jesus of Nazareth. And that's when the Romans come in and beat down the Greeks and basically take over all their stuff and change the name of their gods and basically take over Greek society. It's kind of like that meme, hey, can I copy your work? Yeah, but just change it a little bit so they don't know you copied it. You guys know what I'm talking about? It's kind of a dead meme, maybe 6 months ago, 7 months ago. I don't know, guys. It's a dead meme. But anyway, guys, so let's have a brief recap. I hope by now you know the characteristics of ancient Greece. They had, in some places, they had democracy. They had polises, which were city-states. They were polytheistic religion. And then, like I said, Alexander the Great goes in and conquers pretty much, this huge area and spreads those ideas all over the Middle East and parts of Asia. All right, guys, that's the end of the notes, and I will see you in class.